Greetings, my name is Barbara Ederle. I am a student here at Liberty University, and I'm in the School of Psychology studying industrial organizational psychology. Today I'm going to report and present to you work-family conflict and its roles in domestic violence and workplace violence. We'll operationally define work-family conflict, domestic violence, and workplace violence. We'll discuss current state of research, the gaps and limitations of that research. We'll discuss a biblical perspective, talk about research questions and my proposed study. We'll talk about my methodology and what findings I anticipate to find from this study. What is work-family conflict? Work-family conflicts refers to the competing demands and pressures that arise from balancing the responsibilities of one's professional life and their personal life, particularly family obligations. This conflict can manifest in two primary ways, which are work-to-family conflict and family-to-work conflict. Work-to-family conflict are where the pressures of work interfere with family responsibilities, and family-to-work conflict is where family demands disrupt your work performance. The work-family conflict and family-to-work conflict are two distinct forms of work-family conflict that describes how demands in one domain can interfere with another. So work-to-family conflict occurs when the pressures and responsibilities of work negatively impact family life. For example, long working hours, job-related stress, work commitments. They may limit the time and energy an individual has for family activities, and this can lead to feelings of guilt or frustration for the family and for the individual. This type of conflict can affect relationships, parenting, and overall the family dynamics. The family-to-work conflict, conversely, arises when family responsibilities hinder or diminish work performance. And this might involve distractions from family obligations, but the time and energy it takes for caring for children, managing household tasks, routine or non-routine, and then that can lead to decreased focus, productivity, and job satisfaction. Individuals experience this conflict may feel torn between fulfilling family needs and fulfilling workplace expectations. So both types of these conflicts highlight the challenges individuals and employees face in balancing their life, their professional life, and their personal life. So the current state of research on work-family conflict. So first I'll discuss what we currently know about work-family conflicts presence in the workplace, and then I'll talk about the remedies that we know are currently working. So workplace aggression is known to produce higher levels of work-family conflict. We know that weekend shifts induce significantly higher work-family conflict in workers. We know contractors and self-employed experience highest amount of work-family conflict. And we also know marital status is associated with work-family conflict, that females experience more work-family conflict than males, and that widowed employees report the highest amount of work-family conflict. Organizational employee behaviors are influenced by work-family conflict as well as coworker conflict. And we know within specific industries that healthcare workers experience an exuberant amount of work-family conflict, followed by hospitality jobs and retail job stress. The remedies that we know are currently working are flexible work schedules and telecommuting significantly increased well-being and significantly reduced work-family conflict without affecting someone's work performance. And then we also know that enhancing the perceived safety climate within workplaces and providing the appropriate training increases work performance and decreases work-family conflict. We also know employees yearn for perceived organizational support and attention to assist them in balancing work-family conflict. And then the evidence for community resources in decreasing work-family conflict by increasing violence prevention endeavors. So, work-family conflict and its relationship with domestic violence. In Georgia, domestic violence is defined as an act or a pattern of abusive behavior in a relationship used by one partner to gain or maintain control of another. And so I chose the state of Georgia because my proposed study will take place here in Georgia. And this will include physical violence threats, emotional abuse, and other forms of intimidation against a current or former partner. So the relationship between two people is determined by a domestic, the relationship between two people determines if a domestic violence has taken place. And so because the domestic relationship can have so many details to it, I am adhering to the official code in the state of Georgia, annotated in section 19-13-1, where domestic violence is considered a commitment of any felony, battery, assault, simple battery, stalking, criminal trespass, or criminal damage to property from one person to another who is involved in a domestic relationship with another. And a domestic relationship is a current or former spouse, a person who shares a child, whether having lived with one or another or not, parents, step-parents, foster parents, children, stepchildren, and foster children, and people who currently lived with or having once lived with one another. And domestic violence can include sibling rivalries, although I don't see sibling fights charged as domestic violences all that often, but they can be if a prosecutor chooses to do so. This also includes roommates, past and prior. The current state of research on domestic violence. Spousal abuse refers specifically to abusive behaviors. Intimate partner abuse is a broader term that encompasses abusive behaviors between current and former intimate partners, whether having lived with or not, and regardless of their marital status. Adolescent abuse refers to harmful behaviors directed toward young people, typically between the ages of 10 and 19, and this abuse can take various forms, including physical abuse, emotional or psychological abuse, manipulation. There's also sexual abuse, neglect, physical neglect, and sometimes emotional neglect. And then child abuse is similar to adolescent abuse, but the magnitude of devastation increases due to the child's age and level of vulnerability. Workplace violence is the action of violence in the workplace, and this also includes a mere threat of violence. It's defined as any act of violence or threat of violence that occurs in work setting, including physical assaults, threats, harassments, or intimidations. This encompasses incidents involving employees, clients, and customers. And previous studies have identified that the effects of workplace violence cause demoralization, depression, loss of self-esteem, and oftentimes sleeping disorders and emotional disorders and other types of disorders. One study proposed increasing collaborative efforts to stave off workplace violence and enhance the healthcare employee work-life balance. We also know that well-informed organizations recognize that domestic violence can spill over into the workplace, creating a significant issue for both the employees and the employers. So this understanding highlights that individuals who experience domestic violence may face harassment, stalking, or even violence in the workplace, which affects safety, productivity, and mental health of the individual being victimized, but also those who are surrounding that person. There's a growing awareness that workplaces have responsibility to address and mitigate these risks, including domestic violence. So the current state of research in workplace violence. We do know that there's a significant negative association with job satisfaction and workplace violence, as well as thriving at work and workplace violence. We know that there's a significant association with job satisfaction and predictions of turnover. We know that an unsafe climate and lack of violence prevention are risk factors for high verbal aggression and physical violence. We know that workplace ostracism is positively associated with work-family conflict, and the work-family conflict affects workplace violence. We also know higher levels of perceived organizational support are associated with lower levels of work-family conflict, and that work-family conflict has a significant positive relationship with deviant organizational behavior, deviant interpersonal behavior, and deviant frontline behaviors, which are indicative of workplace violence or its potential of its presence in a workplace. About 10% of all employees are reporting being bullied at work, while 30.6% report the bully was a coworker and 71.9% reported the bully was a supervisor or higher level manager. What we don't know is what percentage of this comes from outside of the workplace. We know intimidating and threatening behavior are the most frequent bullying behavior within the workplace. And also in healthcare settings, 63% of the employees reported being the target of violence, some by the patients and some by other coworkers. So there are quite a few gaps and limitations within the current research. So regarding work-family conflict on its own, we do not know what is needed more. If tangible resources are needed or intangible resources. And tangible resources include food, clothes, shelter, or any physical items that might assist an employee who it might be struggling with work-life balance, or intangible resources like family therapy, resilience building, communication skills. Regarding the relationship between work-family conflict and domestic violence, we do not know what the magnitude of prevalence of both of these constructs exists simultaneously and how often domestic violence manifests due to work-family conflict. And likewise, in work-family conflict and workplace violence, we do not know the magnitude of that relationship either. And regarding domestic violence and workplace violence, we know workplace violence has little to no research indicating the prevalence when domestic violence and workplace violence overlap, and how often work-family conflict is a factor or even the primary factor. As Christians, we're called to exercise Matthew 5:9, where Jesus states, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God." This is one of the Beatitudes. It's a way to embody our faith and promote a culture of peace, especially in challenging environments like the workplace. We are called to be peacemakers, and the peace that we have experienced through Jesus Christ, we're also called to share that with the world. And while some people may not actively accept that or accept Jesus as Savior, we can still use biblical principles to guide programs that we can and do have the power to set up in our communities and in our workplaces. And by being peacemakers, Christians can model the Christ-like behavior. We can promote positive work environments. We can support our colleagues in need. We can encourage reconciliation. And by embodying all of these principles, Christians can contribute to a safer, more respectful workplace that aligns with the biblical values and supports the well-being of all employees, thus enhancing the community, the workplace, and individuals' lives in one simultaneous action. The purpose of my research is to more efficiently identify the organizational behaviors induced by work-family conflict, to provide prevention strategies to avoid creating work-to-family conflict, and to mitigate adversity created by family-to-work conflict. So my research will take place in Cobb County, Georgia. And so the questions that I have are specific to the geographical region. So in Cobb County, does work-to-family conflict provoke more domestic violence than family-to-work conflict provokes workplace violence? Also would like to know, in Cobb County, Georgia, does prevention of workplace violence and domestic violence require more tangible resources or more intangible resources? And so I propose this study, that this research will examine the relationship between work-family conflict, domestic violence, and workplace violence within working residents of Cobb County, Georgia, by exploring the region's top industries of healthcare and social assistance, professional, scientific, and technical services, accommodation and food services, retail trade, and administrative and support and waste. And the industries I just listed off have come from the Area Labor Report of Cobb County, Georgia, that tells me which industries we have the highest percentages of, but also the raw numbers of working people in these industries. I've also looked at the Cobb County, Georgia Violent Offense Report, which indicates how many forcible felonies are there. And within this violent offense report, I can also determine which violent offenses were workplace violence and which were domestic violence. And then I would like to share my method with you. And how will I research this? I will begin utilizing the Cobb County, Georgia area labor profile to identify the most recent top industries within the county. Now, the one I just showed you is for 2023, and so I would wait for the most recent area labor profile to begin the study. Then mail the surveys to the Cobb County residents who are identified as employees of one of those industries, and send a QR code with a direct link to an online survey. The survey will consist of items from the work-family conflict scale, cumulative lifetime violence scale, cumulative lifetime violence severity scale, the workplace violence survey, and lifetime domestic violence scale. I had to include the cumulative lifetime violence severity scale because the survey will help me delineate between the respondent being a perpetrator, a victim, or both. Due to having 3 independent variables, potentially 4, depending on what data I get back from that cumulative lifetime violence severity scale, I intend on using a factorial ANOVA to analyze the data. I'll interpret the results, examine the findings, answer the research questions, then determine potential applications to implement within the community. Respondents with the presence of work-family conflict and domestic violence or workplace violence risks will randomly be assigned to tangible or intangible resources. The sample will be resurveyed after 6 months of intervention, and then the sample will also be resurveyed after 1 year of intervention. The intervention being either they're supplied with tangible resources, such as physical goods, or intangible resources where I will be able to provide resilience building skills, communication building skills, and in some cases, I should be able to provide counseling, either family therapy or individual therapy. And then I will interpret that data and then answer the research questions. The findings that I expect to achieve from this or obtain from this survey and study is to identify the degree of the relationship between work-family conflict, workplace violence, and domestic violence events. And once the relationships are established, the study should be able to identify where and how county government funding should focus upon. Whether we should focus more on the family or focus more on the organizations, or maybe split evenly down the middle. Furthermore, the findings should highlight the level of intensity work-family conflict has on county businesses and organizations regarding domestic violence and workplace violence, how to approach this issue as a public health concern, and then lastly, the findings will pave the pathway for further research that will provide further understanding, conceptualize future change that could help produce healthy and thriving workforce in Cobb County. So we have operationally defined work-family conflict, domestic violence, and workplace violence. We discussed the current state of research, gaps and limitations, biblical worldview. We talked about my research questions, my proposed study and methodology, and what I anticipate my findings to be. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to insert them in the comments below.